Well, great. Well, welcome everyone. It's my pleasure, and thank you, Dennis, for putting this together. And thank you to our sponsors, My Hushly, Treasure Data, To the Web. I know Talent isn't in the house today, but it's my pleasure to welcome today's speaker, Robert Rose, and I'm going to read this directly from her website. Is a sought-after consultant. He is a best-selling author, and I can speak to that. Yeah. He's a keynote speaker, and he's one of the world's most recognized experts in content strategy and marketing. If you haven't yet read Experiences, and this is co-authored with Carla Johnson, also one of our guest speakers, friend of ours, open it up. It's still relevant today. Now, when you find yourself in a content conundrum, ask yourself, what would Robert Rose do? That's what I always do. Now, I don't know the provenance of the sticker. Dennis, you'll have to give the backstory there. But today, Robert is going to lead us in a discussion around Web 3.0. And we're going to find out
how you put the rock and roll quotes around.
Well, and here's why, because that can mean many things to many people. And so I'll air quote Web 3.0. In my tweet, I asked, WTF about NFTs, which is where's the fire with NFTs? So take it away, Robert. Thank you very much.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you for having me. This has been a long time coming, I know, and we've been trying to put this together for some time. I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to see all of you and get to chat about this. I'm not going to do any slides. I'm just going to talk for a bit, and then let's talk about it, because I don't want to. My real goal here is not to present to you; it's to talk, and because I think anybody, with the healthy skepticism that has been presented, even in just introducing each other, I think the key there is that a healthy dose of skepticism is absolutely warranted. There is nonsense abounds in this space right now. And so the real question is, what should we be paying attention to? And as I've spent more time in this, the thing is, I've become intrigued with it, not because of the sort of gold rush or the tulip sale or, whatever metaphor or past historical experience we want to sort of throw on top of this, all of which I think are appropriate. But I actually do think there is real interesting exploration to do in the technology here, and the technology that would enable customer experience and the sort of evolution of what we have seen in content marketing to really take root in a different way. And so the whole genesis of this conversation, when I was talking with Dennis and Rich, came about because of something that I wrote on the Content Marketing Institute blog. And it's why I believe that when much of what gets conflated these days with Web3 is this idea of snake oil sales and overpriced JPEGs and all of those things. But as a marketing tool, as a mechanism by which we engage customers to do things that ultimately benefit us, but actually delivers value to them, the opportunity, I think, in Web3, sort of as a concept, whether it's here or not, we can certainly discuss, but as a concept, the opportunity is, a lot of people have said, like, okay, well, if Web 1.0 was the read web, Web 2.0 was the read write web, where, consumers were allowed to talk back and, create conversation. And Web 3 is the own, right, where you're allowed to own or create a decentralized ownership model. And I disagree with that a little bit, because I'm not sure own is the right word. To me, it's around the ability to co-create. And the opportunity, I think, for all of us as we start looking at how we're developing better customer experiences is, what is the role of co-creation with our customers? I go back to, there was a wonderful book. I'll get the title of it here in just a second. So we've all heard the case study of Cleveland Clinic. And Cleveland Clinic, doing content marketing, absolutely, Amanda Todorovich there is just slaying it in terms of what is really going on there, creating a completely separate division of the company, really, that draws revenue, that does, all the things that Joe and I talked about in Killing Marketing. They're marketing at a profit. But the main thing that they're doing there is they're funding their classic marketing and advertising efforts through the ability to create these valuable blogs and valuable health libraries that they've created. What James Merlino, who is the chief experience officer there, so he's 4 levels up from Amanda in terms of the executive, and Dr. James Merlino, he's a medical doctor. He wrote a book around patient experience, what he wanted to call the patient experience. We would, in those of us not in healthcare, we call it the customer experience, of course. And one of the things that I pulled out of the book and I now use in many of my presentations is this quote that he said, where he was actually talking about, not directly referencing, but talking about the content programs that they had at Cleveland Clinic. And he called them their tools, which he was saying, we not only now have the tools to sort of speak to or publish to our patients, but we have the tools now to actually make them partners in their own health. In other words, we're helping our patients become educated, inspired, and co-creators, quite frankly, of their future health by helping them and co-creating with them the solutions that they need to lead healthier lives. And that is a fascinating thing to me as a marketer, because that is the opportunity that content really provides, is for us to engage our customers in a way that co-creates value, where the B2C version of that, the sort of CPG version of that, is what Lego does so amazingly with some of their programs, where they allow their customers to come in and pitch new ideas and get voted on new ideas. And if they get enough pitches or votes on a particular product, they'll build the product. So that evolution in the customer relationship is what fascinates me. And so when I start to apply a Web3 technology there, you start to see how there may be an opportunity for us to start to engage as marketers, customers, to co-create content or other solutions that help us develop a better experience without the necessary sort of exchange of personal information that has always sort of been embedded in that relationship. Oh, in other words, before I have a relationship with you, I have to give you my email address, or if I have to give you my physical address, or I have to give you my phone number so that you can, we can actually communicate at a regular basis. And so I start thinking through that and I say, okay, great. There is Web3 out there. And by the way, on Ad Age, if you haven't seen it, there is a constantly updated list of NFT projects and what brands are doing with NFTs, et cetera. Most of them are yawn worthy. I mean, they are just like nonsense, right? They're just literally little experiments that are going on. And some of them might be successful, some of them might. Most of them are just literally putting up images and saying, hey, we're selling you a special version of the Heinz 57 label with dogs on it. And now you can actually check out what's going on and buy that as an NFT. That's, that's silly. Or you've got, JP Morgan Chase building a little frontage of a bank in the metaverse, in the Facebook metaverse, where you can go do absolutely nothing in there. Right? You can go and see their signage and you can hang out in their lobby and do things, but you can't really do anything. It's not functional. There's no utility there. And so when we start thinking about and the true Web3 technology, just as we did in the early days of content marketing, it is all about the usefulness of the thing that we're creating, the experience that we're creating, the usefulness of the content. And that's why I think Web3, NFTs, that sort of idea has much more in line with content marketing than it does even regular standard advertising and direct marketing, because the whole heart of what makes an NFT useful is its utility. In other words, if you sell or create an NFT and the smart contract behind that NFT is something useful, like, access to events or a ticket to something, or it gives you special privileges to be able to do something, which is why we've always talked about it. The most easy to notice use case here is in customer loyalty. And those kinds of things then become interesting because they can then be done without necessarily tying myself to some identification in a CRM system. I just have it and I can resell that thing and I can do things with that asset that gives me special privileges that I might not have been able to do before. And so that's the part as I start thinking down, like, what are the opportunities for us as content marketers to use Web3 technologies? The first thing that comes to mind is I've been calling it sort of tokenized customer experience or tokenized CX. And that's just, I've just in my own brain, that's what I've been calling it. I'm not suggesting that should be the name or anything, but the idea here is that if we start looking at what will not, maybe not what's available today, but when we start thinking about what's available tomorrow, how can I start leveraging just, the most basic use case of this is the resource center that we build with our, with our assets, our digital assets. Well, what if we started letting customers co-create some of those digital assets? In other words, we start letting a group like this, right, contribute to a white paper on, let's call it content strategy. So all of us have a little bit of participation in creating this amazing thought leadership asset for a brand around the idea of content strategy. And now what if I'm in the brand and I issue that access to that through the idea of a wallet, where if you buy into it with access into it, whether it's free or whether you have to provide some level of agreement to do something as part of that, now all of a sudden I can create not only an asset where I can create a smart contract where all 20 of us get credit, get some sort of monetary compensation for the creation of that asset, but I also have one where I'm actually creating something where the customer can experience that asset and not have to give over their private information in order to experience that, but I still have permission to communicate with them as a marketing brand, product idea. That's the part that excites me around this, is how can we start creating and co-creating relationships with customers using where I don't have to use the classic traditional and some might call antiquated idea of exchange of an email address before I actually have to speak to them. We're not there yet. It's not there yet. And it's certainly not mainstream yet. I've been playing around with some things like access to content via a wallet, and access to content via, an NFT that you hold in a wallet. But that's really just sort of the experimentation phase. So just to sum up, and then we can certainly open it up for discussion, which is how can we start? The question I want to ask myself as well as marketers and the clients that I work with is, how can we start paying attention to Web3 technology and combing through all of the nonsense that still abounds and start to think about it, not in a way of how we're going to sell overpriced JPEGs or, offer up crypto or those kinds of things, but how do we start using blockchain, decentralized technology to help us co-create relationships with customers in a much different and evolved way than we have in the past? And there, I can't help but get a little excited about it. That's the part that gets me, pumped up. So I'll stop there for a second and open it up for questions, conversation, comments, anything like that, and we can talk all about it.
Great. Well, thank you, Robert. And while folks either type a question into the chat or raise your hand on camera or use the Zoom hand raising, I see Brian has one. I'll start us off with a quick recap that'll lead to a question. So you mentioned Web 1.0 is sort of that read era, right? One directional, we're publishing stuff out. Web 2.0, read, write, right? A lot of us had MySpace pages, right? Web 3 being own, but it's really, like you said, no, it's co-creation with customers. That co-creation is a form of experience. So getting back to your seventh era of marketing here, the experience era. My question to you is, how do you view this as an opportunity to bring our audience along for a co-creation ride to earn some of their valuable attention, right? It's another mechanism by which it's a win-win. Are you seeing that as an opportunity? Yeah,
that's exactly it, right? I mean, the idea here is that, I don't know if you've noticed out there, but it's noisy. in terms of the amount of content getting created by brands, by all of us, and the amount of, just general noise that's out there. And what you can start to see happening in good and bad ways, by the way, this isn't all good, but there's definitely good and bad to this, is that people are gathering, or smaller groups of people are gathering around more niche topics, right? So in many ways, we could definitely open a bottle of wine or beer or non-alcoholic beer or something like this and talk about, there's a very similar trend that happened toward the, end of the 1800s into the early 1900s, when yellow journalism was really big, and when there was huge, there were so many different newspapers and publications emerging. This is certainly a United States sort of phenomenon, but where there was all these newspapers emerging, really built around, I call it tacit knowledge these days. We used to call it tribal knowledge, but it's not necessarily a politically correct thing to say anymore with tribal knowledge, but tacit knowledge around religion, politics, et cetera, et cetera. And during that whole time was when yellow journalism sort of became a huge problem. This is when privacy came up for the first time. And in fact, privacy came up in front of the Supreme Court. And there was opinions written by James Brandeis, actually, who talked about the right to privacy for citizens. And it was really to fight this, what was getting done with all of these sensationalist, journalistic, and very, very heavy political, because everybody sort of retreated to their own corners, right? Their own little spheres of influence. Mm-hmm. And so that's perhaps the dark side of what we've been seeing recently, with sort of the divide of culturally and politically and all of those kinds of things. But on the other side of this, what we're seeing all of us do is look to communities to co-create experiences for each other, because there's just so much to basically consume. We're starting to find comfort in communities where we can go in and talk about certain things or experience certain things. That's the opportunity for brands. The opportunity for brands is to start to co-create this with audiences that ultimately become customers. So this is why we see somebody like Facebook or somebody like Google or Netflix or all of those things creating walled gardens, because that's where they want you to live. That's their metaverse, right? The metaverse is just another word for walled garden community. And so we're all finding comfort in our own little mini metaverses where we have community with each other and we're co-creating those experiences. So the opportunity for a brand is, how do I create that for my customers, so that I'm not just building marketing where people want to come in and binge watch a white paper or binge watch, some sort of video that goes viral or some 30-second ad or something like that. How do I create a program, a campaign, or an initiative where I'm creating a community where people can come in and live and spend time and get value and all of those kinds of things? And those creation of experiences is really a huge opportunity. Now the question is, how do you facilitate that? Like, how do you facilitate that community to where everybody can come in and participate, but maybe they don't want to actually be known, right? Or they don't want to explicitly give out their private information because there's this concern about privacy and everything that's out there. And so Web3 then provides a mechanism for us to start to think about that, to start to think about how we can build and co-create a community that is facilitated by a technology that doesn't necessarily, we can be protective so that we don't have, the people that we don't want in that community in there, or more people that we do want in there, but we can also not have to, squander their privacy or their information in order to do that.
Right. Very, very good. Yeah. And that resonates with what we're trying to do here with the meetup. I saw Brian has his hand up. Did I just lose Brian? There you are, Brian. Did you still have a question?
Yeah, you bet. Good to see you again, Robert. I'm a big proponent of Web3. I have bought in deep. I saw you at CEX, and the convergence at CEX of the content creators and the Web3 NFT space, I thought was amazing, and tons of opportunities, and lots of different connections and collaborations going on there. and really talking about, this growth of community and converting your audience, your content consumers into an actual community that is engaged and, contributing to the creation, I think is amazing. I'm in higher ed. We're looking for use cases, especially around, blockchain. There's a million different ways that we could utilize the blockchain and solve a lot of problems that we have. So looking forward to that. I'll post a link to one of Fanzo's podcasts. Brian Fanzo has a podcast, and he did a whole episode that was all just on use cases, business use cases of NFTs, that had some interesting ideas in there. I think we're still a long way from implementing a lot of these, but just different ways to think about it. But I was interested in I know you're looking at launching, you have a coin, you're looking at using that to build a community. And I know there's lots of opportunities in creator coins to gate content, to provide levels of access based on ownership. And, the interesting thing is, which I thought was interesting with the never ending tickets for CEX, was you buy a ticket, you buy one of these never ending tickets, you pay more for it, but then 3 years down the road, you still have value. You can still resell it. And it's the same with these creator coins. You're investing in this community, but you hold on because of the value and the utility that community offers. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about what you're looking to do with your.
Sure. Two things there that I'll mention. One is so just taking a step back and looking at the difference between the NFTs and sort of cryptocurrency as an idea, right? As a store of value. And when I think about it, so NFTs to me, I mean, the simplest way, the way I've been explaining it to people who go, all right, just what are we talking about here? We're like, what? Okay, just explain it to me like I'm 5, right? And I said the best way to think about NFTs is as a verb, and all you're doing is you're basically creating a contract that will initiate some sort of action. That's it. That's all it is. Now, it might be 25 actions or it might be 1 action, but that's it. It's just a token that certifies that the action has happened. That's it. That's all it is. And that might be the action that you actually, now own the idea of this digital image, or it might be an action that you now have access, like you're talking about with the never-ending ticket. All of that is speculative against the value returned in the action. In other words, there's nothing really contained within the NFT itself that can't happen offline. Just like there was nothing really that happened in the course of an email that couldn't happen online. But the value theoretically of the NFT is that it happens without, a human interaction. And that's the theoretical value there, is that the NFT, when I buy a ticket to Joe's event for a never-ending ticket, the action is I have access to it if I have access to the ticket. Now, that's all a speculative thing, because maybe 3 years from now, the ticket's worth 0 or negative, or the ticket's worth 3 times what it was worth, because Joe's event is so big and huge and wonderful and all of that. I know which way he'd like it to go. Now, separating that from cryptocurrency and sort of the social coin aspect of things, yeah, I did sign up with Rally to get a creator coin. And the reason I did that was I want to know and learn. I wanted, if there's one course I failed in college, it was on currency and the valuations of currencies across the world and how to do the different valuation. I remember in college taking classes where there were people who were like really into figuring out how to arbitrage the value of the yen versus, because I'm that old, that's when the yen and the dollar were really going at each other. So it's the yen versus the dollar versus the won versus the, versus the pound and all of those kinds of things. And you started trying to figure out currency valuations and how they affected each other and all of those kinds of things. And I'm fascinated with that whole thing. So I wanted to learn how the creator coin, which is of course related to the Rally coin, which of course is then a side chain of Ethereum. So all of those things are linked together. As much as they'll tell you they're not, they are absolutely linked together inextricably. And so I wanted to learn, and I didn't want it to be about me, which is maybe a bit of a difference in some of the other creator coins that are out there. I wasn't looking to build my personal brand with it, or I wasn't looking to build any kind of sort of, value of my time or, that sort of thing with this creator coin. Because to me, it was much more around the technology behind it and the sort of theory of currency valuations than anything else, which is why I called it Idea. So the coin is called Idea Coin because to me, it's about ideas that can happen. And then I wanted a place, and I'm building this place, and thank you for mentioning it. I'm actually going to build a little community where we can go figure all this stuff out together. I'm going to build a little community of, I'm calling it Experience Advisors, which is a group of people very much like yourselves who are in the business of creating experiences for other people and want to learn about new technologies, best practices, and all those kinds of things. And basically, the idea there is really just exploration of ideas. And I thought it might be a cute, way to sort of align those two things by calling the coin Idea. So that's the whole thing to me is, how do I get deeper into this and learn? And hopefully, if we'll see, I mean, to me, it's not about selling things or monetizing it with swag or anything like that. It's all about how do I, if it rises in value at all because the ideas are good and the coin rises in value and we get lucky and all those kinds of things, yay, everybody wins. And if it doesn't, nobody loses.
I've been chatting some links as we go. So I found your Idea page, I think on Rally. I think it's the right one.
Yep,
also,
that's
those
it.
of you
and then you can go to experienceadvisors.io if you want to read a little bit about the thing. I'm looking to launch in the 1st of June. So,
Okay.
and so spoiler alert, that's coming up, and I'm going to be announcing that on the podcast soon enough. Thank you, Brian Piper, for making me launch this thing before I even wanted to launch it. But yeah, there you go.
Right. It's on the DL. We signed the non-disclosure, right?
Yeah, it's all under NDA.
Right.
Yeah.
I am looking at questions in the chat, and from Hyde. Hi, welcome, Hyde. I don't think we've seen you on a meetup before. And Lori had answered this in the chat, but Robert, we're curious your intake. Could you describe what does that ideal relationship with a customer look like? What are some things that entail that ideal sort of nirvana customer relationship for our friend Hyde here?
Yeah, I think ultimately, independent of whether you're a B2B business or a B2C business, to me, the ideal customer is one that wants to be in your business. I mean, that's sort of the zenith, if you will. If you have a customer that is so passionate about what you do that they want to do it with you, right? I mean, so the sort of quintessential or the best, highest sort of existence of that is the what's his name? Kayam, the shaver guy who basically in the 1970s said, I love the company so much that I bought the company, right? I mean, so that's your ultimate customer. That's the ultimate relationship you want to have. I mentioned Lego a bit ago. When you talk to Lego fanatics, they are fanatics, and they will not only participate, and they will not only, join in and suggest new ideas. They'll buy everything that the company ever produces simply just because Lego produced it. That's the ideal relationship you want to have with a customer, is one that is so passionate about what you do that they want to do it with you. That's why I'm so excited about this idea of co-creation as a goal for marketing, because we can just look and see that that's been the trend for 20 years, right? So if you think about, one of the things that I talk about in presentations a lot these days is there's a book, great book, by the way. James Heskett wrote this book back in 1998, 1999, somewhere in there. It's called The Service Profit Chain. And the service profit chain was really where we got the whole idea of, when we started calling customers evangelists or apostles. And that came from Scott Cook, the CEO of Intuit, who was interviewed for Heskett's book. And what he talked about in that book was that digital and all the disruptions of digital was changing the relationship with the customer so that you could no longer afford to simply have a satisfactory experience. You can't just like satisfy the customer experience. You have to create what they call the evangelists or apostles to compete in today's world. And that lasted, I think, until pretty much Web 2.0, when we started to have this ability to have the customer become part of the experience itself, right? Where they were going to comment not only on the experience they had with a brand, but quite honestly, the experience they had in selling, getting sold to by the brand. And once we started to see that, that gave us the emergence of content marketing. Certainly, there's the famous, I've told this story a million times, that one of the reasons that Red Bull is the poster child of content marketing is because one of the things that they learned was that, Red Bull tastes like shit. We all know that. I mean, that's just a given. So Red Bull tastes like crap, but they noticed that people would recommend Red Bull. People who had never tried Red Bull would recommend it, and people who tried it and didn't like it would recommend it based on the value of the content that they got through extreme sporting events or the video or the documentary that Red Bull produced. That's powerful to get a customer recommendation from customers who've never tried or have tried it and didn't like it to your brand. That's the power of great content marketing, is that you get that early relationship with customers that will ultimately become your most passionate, most loyal, your fanatic customers. So basically what Heskett was talking about is that relationship got pulled back further and further and further back. It wasn't just customer loyalty after purchase. It was creating and treating customers as customers well before the purchase. And that's really the heart of content marketing to begin with, is sort of establishing trust, establishing value, and all of those things. So if you can do that, if you can start to create those fans, if you can start to create those apostles, evangelists in the earliest part of the relationship with the brand, with your point of view on the world, with trust, with value, with utility, well, now you've created a relationship that is, well on its way to becoming that Victor Kiam. Victor Kiam is the guy's name. And so Victor Kiam, sort of idea where people really want to participate.
Good. Thank you. Detailed answer. Any other questions, folks? Chime in, please. Or I'll call on you.
So I feel like I belong to many online communities, but not every brand can have this big compelling community, because I probably have 12 different marketing software applications running at different clients, as I speak. And I can't be in a community involved in each one of those prospects. I mean, each one of those product, one of those companies, even though I might be immersed in one of them for, several days setting it up, or kind of keep coming back to it month after month, year after year. But I just don't have the time to be involved in all this plethora of communities out there for all these great brands that I like. So how does that shake out? Not everybody has to have the best content. Not everybody can have the best community.
Yeah, no, it's a fantastic point, Todd. It wasn't me, but there are plenty of people out there who have sort of, they're usually naysayers of the idea of content marketing and building an audience. And what they'll talk about is that nobody wants, they usually phrase this through social media, and that idea, which is nobody wants to have a relationship with their butter, right? I mean, nobody opens the relationship and says, oh, I haven't really talked to my mustard today, right? So I'm going to go have my online conversation with my mustard. Of course, that's true. However, that doesn't mean that if you're a mustard brand or a butter brand that you shouldn't be building in direct audience, relationships, and trying to establish at least awareness of or affinity toward the kinds of things that you're going to be doing. Of course, the dairy industry has done that forever, and we can talk about just about any industry that's, there's do you remember that, you guys remember the movie Dave? Where Dave is, it's like Kevin Kline, and he's president. He's been made president, and he's not the president. He's just a doppelganger for the president. And he's sitting in this meeting, and they're talking to him about the budget. And one of the Secretary of Transportation comes in and is proposing this new budget for a program that's going to make people feel better about the cars that they've already bought. And basically it's a campaign for that. And Dave looks at him with this confused look and says, wait a minute, you're telling me we're going to spend $50 million on a campaign for people who've already bought cars and like their cars to feel better about the car that they've already purchased? And it's meant as a joke, but it's absolutely true. It's absolutely a great idea for a campaign, is to make people feel better and have an emotional response to something they've already purchased, so that when they're ready to purchase again, they're going to purchase something else. So that's an aside, because at the heart of your question is this idea of what can't be a part of every community, and every brand isn't appropriate for a community. But what I love about that idea, and what really excites me around the idea of Web3, is when it starts to become interoperable. So the classic example of this would be, if I launch my idea coin in that community, and I've got, NFTs and stuff like that in there, I could create an NFT that Joe's community could get value out of, and it adds value to his community. But through the interoperability of it, it's not like I'm giving my email address to me. It's just I'm adding value and getting value back through whatever smart contract we construct to do that. Think about it like this. Think about it if you had American Express points that you could use anywhere. Like what if Amex points and they're pretty much like that now. You can almost use them anywhere. Like Amazon. I've got the ability on my Amazon now that instead of spending dollars for products, I can spend Amex points because it's directly integrated. But what if I could spend my Taco Bell points on Amazon, right? What if I could set, and so you start to build in this value with smart contracts and Web3 technologies that start to let communities be interoperable with each other, where you don't have to be a member, or you are brought in only when it's relevant to you into that community. Does that make sense?
Todd, you tracking?
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, it does make some sense. It does.
Yeah.
And as I was thinking about that too, is there are probably mustard aficionados out there that would love to be involved in a community about mustard.
Of course. Yeah, absolutely.
And it's not me, but for a company, for a mustard company, if that's a large national brand, if you have 0.01% of your customers that are that excited about mustard, that's going to be a big community.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And the same is true for things like, craft beer and all those kinds of things. And the interesting thing is, what if all of those people that are aficionados of the mustard could co-create something that actually is relevant for you, which is helping you make a selection about mustard that you may not have known about before, right? So I get these wonderful pieces of content from a wine club that I'm a part of, that's built off of the community that says, oh, this was amazing, this was not amazing, this is great. But the wine club sends it to me, and then I buy wine based on that. Same kind of deal, where you can have this passionate community who is passionate about it, get something relevant to you without the brand's intervention at all.
Okay, on that note, Dennis, what did you just chat here? Some mustard fan club?
I did a quick search on Google on mustard fan club, and the top.
I swear to God, I just made that up. I didn't even know.
It occurs to me at some point, Robert, that the absence of fostering some form of community for your given audience might be conspicuous, in that without investing millions of dollars, it might not be worth that much, but at least trying a pilot, because if nothing else, in this 3.0 co-creator, you're fostering opportunities for those aficionados to connect with each other.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think that's what you're seeing, right? When, in that sort of very exhaustive list on Ad Age, as well as by the way, Jeremiah Oyang does an amazing job at this as well on his website, has an exhaustive list of experiments being run by brands. And it's fascinating. If you start at the beginning and you sort of work your way down that list, you can see them getting more and more interesting, right? You can see them actually starting out with literally just overpriced JPEGs, right? Where, and then you can start to see them now. I think Starbucks just came out with a new program with NFTs that's going to give you some access to coffee and front of the line access or whatever it is, that their utility is starting to get built into it. And you can just sort of see the progression of it as you sort of move down that timeline. And I think that, to me, is the opportunity for brands to experiment, is to say, let's just try something. Like, the easiest one that comes leaping to mind for most B2B and technology companies is, something around their user conference, right? Where, we can start to bring in our super fans, as it were, because those are the people who typically show up at our user conference, and start to build in some level of access for those, and start to, maybe offer those up through NFTs, and see if there's something to play with there in terms of value.
Yeah, well, I had chatted a link to the Ad Age. You have to have a membership. It's free, but then Dennis, I think you chatted Jeremiah's link as well.
Jeremiah's is free for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
I did not know if the Ad Age one was is protected or not. I think they give you like four pages or something like that, or there's ways, by the way, to hack all that, right? With a little bit of JavaScript, but you didn't hear that from me.
Right. Well, questions. There's some discussion in the chat here around a DAO, a distributed autonomous organization. Can we talk a little bit about DAOs? Do I even have the acronym right? Yeah,
DAOs. Yeah, DAOs. They're interesting. I think they're a little overplayed at the moment. Because, so I heard somebody, Brian, it was you, actually. We had this conversation in Phoenix. We were talking about DAOs for education and curriculum and some of those kinds of things. And I said, have you ever gotten a group of parents in a room and tried to come up with an agreement on curriculum? And good luck with that. So I think DAOs as an idea is really interesting, especially as purchasing groups. I've heard tons of really cool entrepreneurial ideas before Web3 came along about how purchasing groups could be put together for insurance companies. Like, we even talked about one very loosely a few years ago about putting together a group of independent consultants as a purchasing group for liability insurance, right? So literally solopreneur consultants that would get together, and we'd get 500 of us together as a purchasing group to group purchase, liability insurance, which would bring the cost down for the group, but basically would ostensibly, give us all the same level of coverage that we, or more coverage than we would normally be able to get on our own, because they'd be able to spread out the risk there. And so DAOs as purchasing groups are really interesting to me when we start looking at, there was that famous one where the group got together and tried to buy put in their money to buy fractional shares of was it the Declaration of Independence, I think it was, or the Constitution, one of the two. There are others that have been put into place now as the replacement for a corporate structure. I'm really skeptical about that. I'm really, really skeptical about the replacement of company structures with DAOs, because boy, do I just, the biggest challenge I face right now as a consultant, and I mean this earnestly, when I walk into new companies these days, there has been this trend over the last 5 or 7 years to really flatten organizations. And I think that's mostly, not entirely, but mostly been a fail, as I see it. Because I walk into, organizations, and this is especially true in Silicon Valley, where I walk into organizations that are big companies. I'll mention one in particular. They might have kind of a meta name. I don't know. See what I did there? I said the name and I didn't even say the name. And we walked into their B2B marketing group and worked with them a little bit. And I said, tell me about your organizational structure. Like, tell me how decisions get made and budgets get spent. Those were foreign concepts to them. They're probably not these days, but in those days, those heady days of, 7 years ago, those were the idea of organizational structure of who I report to. They didn't have one. They just had jobs. They all just had jobs. And then budgets and how they divvied up budgets, they just spent money until the year was out. And then they got, then they started over again. And so that flattened organization, while it sounds great, it often just results in analysis paralysis and sort of that idea. And I see DAOs going in, when they're structured for corporate ways, going down a similar road. As purchase groups, as communities, as project oriented, to get something done, to have fractional ownership over something that gets done, a project, probably not something I think that works for a business structure. That's my take.
Okay, I'm going to note we had about 5 minutes left. If you can hang around, Robert. Jeff.
Yeah, I'm here until you need me to leave.
Okay, Jeff Rigo, I'm going to call on you from something I see in your chat around smart contracts and partner marketing. Can you tell us more?
Yeah, Todd brought this up, and the challenge here is, if you're, as an individual, engaging with multiple communities, it's you spend a lot of time, and you just can't distribute it and being meaningful, right? But in terms of business, you either go direct or you go with partners. And so while there's a one-to-many relationship between the manufacturer and the partners are not exclusive. They have relationships with other manufacturers, etc. So now you see the network effect kicking in.
Yeah.
Where you have smart contracts going in. So it's, rather than going into a central place, it's completely distributed, and you get value as you hop from one entity to another entity. And that value could be access to product information, stuff, and you control what you want to share, when you want to share, with who you want to share, all of that. Because content is great currency, but it's, as Robert talked about, it's in silos, right? You want to liberate that, and you want it to be kind of inverse, where now the control is not with the manufacturer or the vendor, but it's with people, and they will be able to have access, distributed access, can take away access, can also co-create stuff. So especially if you're looking at it just in a silo, it's tough. But when you start putting in these small steps, the network effect takes over, and that's how you would get smart contracts and content marketing and all of these other Web 3.0 stuff happening. I definitely see it play out there.
100%. Yeah. I mean, I think, one of the interesting things is I was hearing an interview with Beeple, who I had sort of a completely cynical view on in the early days, because of the whole, $69 million sale, blah, 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 blah. But listening to him speak was really interesting because, whatever you think about the multi-million-dollar sales, he was talking about how really his money is made in the resale, right? The sort of network effect of the resale value of his art. Like, that was how he made his, that was where the money was in the royalty that he would get from other collectors selling his stuff to other collectors. And that's ultimately the longer tail of this. And Jeff, to your point, the longer tail of the network effect on some of these agreements, where you don't necessarily have to have humans involved in the interaction of these things. They just happen based on, we transfer this agreement to so-and-so, or this happens and we move this agreement over here, and the smart contract takes care of everybody that needs to get remunerated for whatever it is they did, plus all of the rights that are associated with it, et cetera. Some of the complex sales like homes, commercial real estate, a lot of those things are going to get really disintermediated with smart contracts, because if you can just basically transfer an NFT and it takes care of filling in all of the I's dotted and T's crossed and all the things that need to get done automatically, now you're facilitating one transaction that just automates the rest of it, and that's pretty powerful.
And to add to it, it's, I think, from a personalized experience perspective, right? As you start to learn in the network, wherever node they hop on to, that information is shared, and you can use that information to even further progressively serve personalized experiences, right? So across entities. And so it's highly beneficial to the vendor that's actually serving the content as well as the individual, because the experience is hyper personalized now, because that information is kind of following the user as they go from one node to another. So it's beneficial on all parties involved in the network. So
Thanks. So I am mindful that we're about to close, but we have an additional question. I'd like to welcome Danielle Holdman. Danielle, would you like to share your question with Robert?
Hello, Robert. Hello, members of this meetup. I'm Danielle from San Jose. And outside of NFTs, what I see a majority of individuals talk about, or what I've seen a majority of the individuals that talk about NFTs and are enthusiastic and actually have NFTs are artists. I see a lot of like hip hop artists doing this, like the music industry and totally has taken over. But I don't feel included because I'm not a visual artist. I'm not a spoken word artist. I'm not a singer or anything like that. So outside of NFTs and this whole Web3, where do I fit in? As a solopreneur who specializes in creating content, I look at myself as a content entrepreneur who also offers conscious leadership coaching and business consulting services. So what do I need to, out of all, like I keep hearing about DAOs and smart contracts and NFTs, what is one thing I can focus on?
Well, I don't know that the there is there yet, Danielle, but here's one thing that I'm thinking a lot about, which is when you think about it, the images and music and works of art are the immediate sort of, things that we grasp onto because it's the easiest for us as consumers and sellers to understand, right? So it's ultimately a work of art. Now, I would argue, given the business I'm in, and it's a similar business that you're in, that the things that we produce could also be called works of art in many ways. There's certainly works of science, and in many ways they're works of different kinds of arts. And so whether that's a white paper, whether that's a framework for a content strategy, whether that's a great deliverable for a customer, whether it's the most innovative org chart for how a company should organize itself around the idea of content, those are ultimately pieces of work that either could be created as NFTs themselves and sold with access to them, et cetera, as products. And you could limit the number. In other words, there may be a limited number of these available, and once they're gone, they're gone. Or what we were talking about a little earlier, which I think is the most interesting aspect, is usually those works of art or science are produced by more than one person. Usually we are not the solo author of those things. So you get a group of 5 or 6 people together. Maybe you call it a DAO, maybe you just call it a team. But you get 5 or 6 people together and you want to provide fractionalized ownership of the contributions that everybody makes to this white paper, this book, this framework, this work of IP, and put it out as an NFT where the smart contract handles the basically the divvy up of the revenue. And all of that is handled automatically as you want to, do things. The owner of that, then if you really want to get into it, then the owner of that, the business owner of that particular NFT, that white paper, et cetera, if they then resell it, well, then you get paid again, and you get paid again, and you get paid again, and you get paid again. So just like the owner of a song or the owner of a work of art can get royalties on a particular piece of work that they've created, so can we. And that's where I've been putting a lot of my focus is, and on, as a solopreneur in the consulting space, how can I start to look at my things as works of art?
Real good. Real good. Well, we're out of time. We're a little over the top of the hour.
Yeah.
A couple things. I want to thank everyone for your participation. Thank you, Robert, for all your time and expertise in sharing today. Thanks to our sponsors, and Dennis for getting us off the ground. I'll do one final chat here in the Zoom, and this is to a podcast near and dear to some of our hearts, This Old Marketing. This is one that Robert does with Joe from Content Marketing Institute. I think, Robert, it's Age Before Beauty. One of you guys fit in there somewhere, but have a listen. Robert, any final words, any other places we might go to track Web 3.0 and your thoughts on that?
I think, I would check out, Jeremiah's stuff is really, I think, some of the most useful stuff that I've read in terms of practicality. So that would be my top of the mind. And if I think of anything else, I'll send it along for the team.
Real good. With that, we close. This will be on Dennis on the YouTube as a replay soon.
Correct.
All right. Until next time. Thank you, everyone. Thanks,
All right.
Robert.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everybody. Thanks for having me.
Get it.